Hey, welcome back to Small Sailboat Big Water, part 2 of an ongoing series, how to make your small sailboat more seaworthy. Today we explore some ways of making your sailboat more dependable, enhance its performance, make it easier to sail solo, and always trying to make it more watertight. Your 15 to 25 foot sailboat may not be heading out to sea, but it's highly likely that you'll be crossing a large lake or bay. Having the best designed and equipped boat can be a lifesaver for those times when you have to claw yourself out of a bad situation. Having an understanding of how the key components of a sailboat work in conjunction is key to getting the most out of your boat. Let's take a look at some very small production boats that have completed some big voyages. And let's see what features were designed into them to give them more seaworthiness. And let's see what ideas can be applied to our own boats. Meet Mike Mann. At 22 years old, he soloed his Montgomery 15 from Newport Beach, California to Hawaii. Read the full account in his book, A Little Breeze from the West, wherever fine books are sold. Mike completed this 2,200 nautical mile trip in 36 days. His maximum speed was 4 to 5 knots, and he did it with no self-steering device, with only the old jib sheet connected to the tiller. Mike reported that breaking waves would come over the bow and make their way across the cabin top and enter the cabin through the leading edge of the sliding companionway hatch. So you might want to grab a hose and blast some water at that leading edge and see if the design allows for leaks. J-boats have that low-profile sea hood. In a worst-case scenario, all you can do is throw out the sea anchor and throw in the towel and lock yourself into the cabin. I wonder if anybody's ever come up with a way to dog down a sliding companionway hatch. Like if you knew a knockdown or a rollover was imminent. What do y'all think of this sliding companionway hatch design? Early in Mike's journey to Hawaii, when the boat was fully loaded, he really enjoyed the stability. Mike stated that later in the voyage, he really wished the boat had 400 to 600 pounds more ballast. An obvious exaggeration, but Mike's point is well taken. Now I know what you're thinking. Boy, he sure could have used some depleted uranium in that keel, which is understandable because it's 1.7 times heavier than lead, but it's pricey and it's hard to get a hold of in large quantities. And you probably can imagine how particular the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is. I heard back in the 80s, around the world racing boats were trying uranium ballast. I'm trying to find more information on the racing boat called the Bertie Reed, which got its hands on a depleted uranium keel from its own South African government, who were not too happy to hear that their uranium keel snapped off and sank into the Southern Ocean. And again, I probably know what you're thinking. Great Scott. Well, at least that keel that fell off was depleted uranium and not spent uranium. But that stuff is still very dangerous. If you breathe the dust, you're toast. And with a melting point of 2,066 degrees Fahrenheit, the stuff's going to be a little hard to work with, so crank up your oven. But don't you worry about the gamma rays. I mean, the heavy metal poisoning will kill you long before the radiation. But eventually, the whole idea was banned from sailboat racing, because it gave the boats that had their uranium ballast such an unfair advantage. And we would never want anything toxic or deadly on the bottom of our boats, would we? So definitely use all needed precautions when using copper-based paint. As I went down in the river to pray. Comparable boats designed with more ballast include the Com-Pac 16. This little sailboat is only 9 inches longer than the Montgomery 15 at the waterline. It's nearly 47% heavier, with over 4% more ballast to displacement. Or how about the Nordica 16? This little boat is just shy 175 pounds of displacement, less than the Com-Pac 16 and only 50 pounds less in ballast, giving the Nordica 16 a very high ballast to displacement number of 43.24. Its full keel gives a smooth, solid ride and a sense of security, which is good because this boat has one major drawback. I've never seen a sailboat sit so low in the water. The cockpit is non-self-draining, so a small automatic bilge pump is used. A man by the name of Peter Hahn loved the Nordica 16, but he wasn't real thrilled with a few aspects of it, so he took the molds and modified them and came up with his own boat, the Danica 16. Named for Peter's Danish heritage, he thought the boat looked more Danish than Scandinavian. The sweeping shear line gives it a low freeboard. In combination with a non-self-draining cockpit and the lack of a bridge deck, you're almost inviting water in for lunch. I know this boat is stout with its more than 43% ballast to displacement. It relies heavily on its brawn. This guy, Peter Hahn, he really liked the Nordica 16 and saw a lot of potential on the boat. And he made a few changes before he took one on his journey from Vancouver to Hawaii. His only auxiliary power was a pair of oars. His intention was to set a world record, but he was beaten by someone in an 11-foot boat. Peter added positive flotation to his Danica 16, as well as a deeper, fuller keel and a lazarette, which made the cockpit even smaller, giving it less capacity to hold water. There was also the addition of a bridge deck, which I think is very important. It makes a sailboat more seaworthy, and it's the best seat in the house. New Danica 16 really raised the roof and gave you more headroom. But the best upgrade from the Nordica 16 to the Danica 16 was the addition of the self-bailing cockpit. Moving on, I found this interesting story of a Montgomery 15 knockdown, as told by one Mr. Wood, who sails a 1983 model. So the guy's sailing along with his friend, and they need to lower the head sail, so his buddy goes on the foredeck, and weighing 300 pounds, 40% of the total displacement of the boat, a sudden gust hit and sent the man grabbing the bow pulpit, causing the Montgomery 15 to lose stability, and it was knocked down. The cockpit locker on the high side was flung open and all the contents were thrown into the water and sank to the bottom. The centerboard had retracted and the boat was not self-righting. They only got her back on her feet when they both got up on the keel and used their body weight to get it righted. The companionway hatch opening stayed high out of the water and the cabin stayed bone dry. Weight distribution on small boats is a huge factor. Great reminder to stay extra low on deck. Crawl if you have to. It was mentioned in the story that the captain wished he had his gear in watertight flotation bag, which we talked about in the previous episode. Check it out and hit the like and subscribe button for me if you dig it. And together, let's see how far our boats can go. And remember, a cockpit locker not properly sealed and locked down is nothing more than a gaping hole on the deck. It can be a real problem for boats of any size. Well, that's all the time we got for this week. I'll see you on episode 3 of Making Your Small Sailboat More Seaworthy.